scratches your crotch or something.
I've got a better idea.
You do?
Yeah.
No!
It was like a scientific experiment to study how mass culture turns living people into memes. Only the experiment was conducted live, and the test subject was a world-class pop star. The episode Britney's New Look does not attempt to defend or justify. It takes the camera, wraps it in barbed wire, and shows how it all cuts. It all starts with a minor, almost hopeless absurdity. Britney in the woods, a photographer, a shot, and news that instantly switches the political debate to pop disaster emergency mode. The children, Stan and Kyle, as well as Cartman and Butters, are drawn into it in their own silly ways. First for the chance to make quick money, then out of curiosity, and finally to understand how something human can be turned into a commodity. South Park shows us not the glamour, but the flip side. Not the red carpet, but the backstage area, where people rustle their bank cards and saliva at the same time. The humor here is cruel, but purposeful. Parodic elements are interspersed with situations that make you stop laughing. Britney, driven to extreme exhaustion, attempts suicide, and the series does not hide the consequences. The top of her head is literally missing, and this image works as a visual metaphor for instant and painful alienation. It's shocking, and in that shock, South Park argues with the audience. Should we laugh or face up to what we ourselves are doing? It gets even more intense. The city crowd, paparazzi, and managers don't just react, they are involved in the ritual. The plot develops a chilling analogy with the lottery. In order to ensure a good harvest of attention, society invents a more civilized method of sacrifice, bringing a person to such a state that they themselves choose to disappear. The paparazzi do not look like monsters with fangs. They look like workers on an assembly line, and their routine cruelty is frightening precisely because it is a work routine. They do not film for justice or truth, but for the sake of the next round of consumption. The comedy in the episode often arises from contrast. Children with naive, sometimes foolish motivations are confronted with a system in which no motivations matter. There is only demand. The scenes where the boys try to hide Britney to take her to a safe place turn into an absurd quest. A train to the North Pole, disguises, pranks, and attempts at deception. All of this resembles a childish version of a rescue mission, but the final truth is cruel. The crowd exerts pressure, like a street assault with a collection of lenses. And this is where South Park makes its most painful move. It reveals that public interest is based not on care and sympathy, but on a ritual that dehumanizes the victim. Kyle and Stan, who are initially proud of their heroism, gradually realize that they are just participants in a bargain. Their small good intentions turn into an element of the spectacle. The scene where journalists and spectators photograph Britney to death is not just hyperbole, but a direct jab. Modern media culture is indeed capable of turning empathy into consumption. The finale, where residents shift their attention to a new star, Miley Cyrus, sums it up crudely but accurately. Society is not looking for justice. It is looking for new objects of consumption. And when Stan and Kyle are forced to join the mass chorus, it becomes clear that moral choices in this world are sold as limited edition goods and are easily snapped up. The particular satire is hidden in the details. Headlines that turn tragedy into a discount overnight. TV shows that sell rehabilitation footage as an exclusive. A fan base that hunts not for the artist, but for the next story. In several scenes, children talk about fame as a form of investment. If you're going to save someone, it should be so that you can get something out of it later. And it's funny until you realize that this logic exists outside of cartoons. The humor here is not just a cliché or a mockery of the tabloids. It is a tool that cuts to the quick. You laugh and then suddenly realize that the laughter reflects you yourself. South Park forces us to see that we are not passive witnesses, but active consumers of other people's grief. And therein lies its power. After the episode, what remains is not so much a feeling of satisfaction as a silent question and a bitter aftertaste from a joke that suddenly turned out to be about us. So, a rescue operation. The children decide that they need to hide Britney and take her somewhere where there are no cameras, where she can reboot her image. Classic teenage logic. If you don't know what to do something epic. Their plan is to take her on a train that, according to the children, goes straight to the North Pole. Because, of course, no one films pop stars for morning talk shows there. The plan is as simple as the instructions on a children's toy box. Change her clothes, stuff her into a bag labeled, "Do not touch," and set off into the unknown. Absurdity and the romance of salvation in one bottle. On the road, everything goes according to artistic chaos. Cartman tries to charge for the rehabilitation tour. Butters is frightened by reality. Kyle tries to give a moral lecture, and Stan just tries not to get confused between the words, "I'll help," and "I used that on TikTok." Romance collides with reality when the locomotive drops them off not just anywhere, but near the film set, because someone sold their coordinates for an exclusive. This is where the main idea of the episode comes in. In a world where the price of attention is rising faster than inflation, every secret has its buyer. The paparazzi appear like vicious caterpillars, this time with drones and lenses maneuvering between snowdrifts. They literally block the way like giant ants, and instead of helping, they take pictures. At one point, Cartman, in his element, makes a business proposal. "Guys, let's sell the video. Who will give more?" And that says it all. Salvation turns into an auction. The humor of the series hits the most intimate. Scenes where Kyle tries to explain morality and Cartman calculates the possible profit from dramatic editing are both funny and bitter. South Park doesn't just joke about the filters of fame. It shows how easily conscience can be sold for a couple of clicks. The boys start arguing not about what is right, but about how beautiful it will look in the video, the right angle, dramatic music, the caption "exclusive" at the bottom of the screen. Next comes a series of the harshest caricatures. TV shows that organize support hotlines where volunteers broadcast without listening. Lawyers offering urgent PR rehabilitation with a 24-month installment plan. And producers who assess the degree of brand damage as if it were on the stock market. In one scene, Britney's manager explains that reputation is an asset, it can be restructured, and does so as matter-of-factly as if he were selling hurricane insurance. The satire cuts deep. Humanity becomes an accounting line item. The humor constantly pokes fun not only at the industry, but also at the viewer. The screen flashes with images of a crowd filming everything on their phones, and immediately posting it online with the hashtag #HelpBritney, after which they go for coffee. The joke is that we have already become accustomed to this distance. Someone else's pain is content, someone else's trauma is a meme. South Park gently pushes the viewer towards the mirror, and the mirror reflects likes. But the series is not limited to criticism. It also has a dark irony. Britney herself becomes an archetype, a doll taken out of a box. Even her attempt to disappear is stylized as a theatrical act. At one point, she gets a sincere moment of silence, and the crowd immediately demands an encore. It's like a scene from a nightmare. In it, freedom is just another prop. And when the characters try to give her a normal life, it turns out that such a life is simply not on the price list. Towards the end of the second part, there is a turning point. The children realize that salvation is impossible as long as the system decides what it needs. They look at the crowd and for the first time see not only the source of the threat, but also their own reflection, ridiculous, cowardly, and slightly corrupt. This is the moment when comedy ceases to be merely entertaining. It becomes an accusation. And this is where South Park deftly saws off the leg of the table called public compassion. The ending of this part is not the finale, but a pause before the final act. The children return home, and laughter can be heard off-screen, as if someone has already edited a teaser. It hints that even heroism in the show can be monetized, and often will be. Their faces are a mixture of fatigue and embarrassment. They have learned the price, and they don't like it. The next step is exposure. Who exactly is behind the circus? And is it possible to change the rules of the game in any way? And here we are at the final scene of the performance, where the applause has already been sold out in advance. The third act of Britney's new look is not a climax in the usual sense, but a looping denouement. Everyone jumps into a circle and starts stomping as if it were a ritual. The children return home, but nothing is the same anymore. Their school corridors now resemble news feeds. The same senseless speed, the same thirst for new headlines. They realize that they did not save the girl. They only changed the angle of the shot for a while. And in this world, which feeds on the downfalls of others. Even a noble gesture is turned into content. The humor in the finale becomes almost bitter. In the TV studio, they arranged the latest news about Britney, with voices that were clearly found in a box labeled "Expert on Human Grief." The commercial breaks between exclusives make you think that tragedy sells better than any holiday musical. In one shot, we see a TV sale of a unique reputation management course that promises to bring back the smile to your brand. And it's funny because it sounds like a threat. At this moment, South Park seems to wink. If you want, buy the recipe. If not, watch, but don't be surprised by the consequences. The paradox is that Britney herself, in the final scene, no longer wants to be a star or a victim. She wants simple things. Silence, food without photo shoots, the ability to walk down the street without feeling 1,000 lenses on her back like cold rain. But society doesn't know how to accept simple desires. It needs loud headlines. And when Britney takes a step back from the camera, the crowd perceives it as a pause before the next presentation. The world demands a show, and the show demands victims. This is no joke, it's a business model. The comedy in the episode still works, but now it's like a fine file. It scratches rather than distracts. There's a scene where children appear on a talk show, and the host asks the right questions. Not about how the person feels, but about how many views the video has already gotten. The answers to such questions tear the fabric of empathy to shreds. Instead of compassion, there is view analytics. This is where South Park guesses the malicious modernity. We measure misfortune in clicks and likes, as if it were an objective unit of measurement of humanity. The irony leads to the final downfall. When the city is finally satiated with Britney's drama, a new target appears on the horizon. Another young star whose image has not yet been ruined. The panic we witness turns into festive enthusiasm. Posters are being made, commentators are printing the first hashtags, and PR managers are already dividing up advertising slots. Life moves on, and with it, our moral standards. Some sympathize for a moment, some like a post, and some simply look for what they can sell at the sale of human grief. Here, South Park is clever. Instead of moralizing, it shows the mechanics of the system. There is no grand exposure of a single villain. There is a many-armed machine where everyone has a hand. The viewer with a phone, the paparazzi with a lens, the producer with a contract, the manager counting the profits. Comedy becomes a mirror that does not embellish. It shows not a monster, but ourselves, neatly labeled consumer. And it's funny and scary at the same time, because the viewer understands that this mechanism can only be stopped when fewer people want to watch. The final shots are also a joke if you understand it correctly. The children sit in class and discuss not salvation, not morality, but how to turn what happened into a miniseries. Cartman is already drawing up a business plan. Butters is afraid that his parents might become the heroes of the next disaster. And Stan and Kyle are trying to figure out what to do next. Their conversation is like an afterword to a humanity exam where the teacher forgot to ask questions. And in this senseless commotion comes the main blow. Even children have learned the rules of the game, and this is more frightening than any anger. But South Park leaves room for one small, bitter laugh. At the very end, the camera lingers for a moment on the faces of those who filmed everything on their phones. They look at the screen and are already scrolling through the feed in search of the next story. Their faces are not cruel. They are just busy. This is the final punch. The anger is not that people are cruel. The anger is that we are all so used to it that we perceive other people's pain as background noise, necessary to create a mood. The conclusion of the episode is neither comforting nor accusatory in a one-sided sense. It is an invitation to self-criticism. Should we laugh at it or start with ourselves? South Park does not give simple answers. It puts mirrors side by side and invites everyone to take a look. Is it funny? Yes. Is it bitter? Without a doubt. But is it useful? Absolutely. If, after watching the screen, you suddenly decide to put down your phone, turn away from the next avalanche of headlines, and for at least a minute let people be people, not objects. And if you don't do that, don't worry, another episode is already in production.